Raul Meza Torres, the youngest hitman of the Sinaloa cartel. Long before turning 15, this teenager knew exactly what he wanted to be. Raul wanted to become a hitman for the Sinaloa cartel, and the craziest part is that he fulfilled his wish before turning 15. However, Raul was not the only 15-year-old hitman in Mexico. There were many. The difference was that, unlike his armed juvenile counterparts, Raul had something special, something that other teenage hitmen clearly did not have. The idea that kids like Raul sell drugs, carry weapons, and kill people sounds strange and disturbing to most people. But for those familiar with the violent business of the Mexican cartel, it is a reality. A sick reality that has persisted for decades. Children as young as 10 are known to lead drug trafficking gangs in their schools for twisted mafia. And when these individuals decide it's the right time, they order these poor kids to commit atrocities in their name. Redeem, a children's rights defense organization in Mexico, once published a study estimating that 30,000 children were already working for cartels in 2019, and another 250,000 were at risk of recruitment. But it doesn't end there. They also estimated that 21,000 children were killed in Mexico between 2000 and 2019. A troubling majority of these kids played an active role in the violence that ended their lives. Now, the sad reality is that most of these children had no choice but to join due to poverty and fear. But in the case of Raul Meza Torres, the reality is a bit different. Because Raul was not poor, and he definitely did not need protection from rival cartels. If anything, they probably needed protection from him. So, who was Raul Meza Torres? And why do we pay more attention to him than to other child killers? Raul Meza Torres. Raul Meza Torres was born in Culiacan, Sinaloa on October 31st, 1991. From the moment he took his first breath, it could be said that there was going to be a big problem in the young man's future. Why? His entire environment was deeply involved in the Sinaloa cartel. His father, Raul Meza Ontiveros, was a legend of the Sinaloa cartel, commonly known as El Mex. The old man had such a high rank that he became the right-hand man of Javier Torres Felix, alias LJT. Raul's father had an impressive criminal record and a knack for escaping the clutches of the law. In 1989, he was arrested by the Sinaloa police on multiple charges of murder, and somehow he managed to get away. However, a year later, he would be accused again, but this time of kidnapping and assaulting 2 women. Once again, he proved too elusive and escaped unpunished. It wasn't until May 27, 1997, when Raul was just 6 years old, that his father's luck ran out. He was arrested by federal agents and linked to a safe house where 384 kilos of Colombian cocaine were found, along with weapons and several customized cars for distribution. This discovery earned Raul's father a 10-year sentence. Miraculously, he was released after only a year behind bars. In the eyes of the law, Raul's father was a hardened criminal who only walked free due to the rot in the system. But for 7-year-old Raul, his father was a legend, and his family fit the small boy's definition of legend. When Raul reached puberty, his girlfriend was none other than Teresa Zambada Niebla, the daughter of Almayo Zambada himself. Raul was a narco royalty. He was deeply involved, and like a fish unaware of the water because it had spent its whole life in it, Raul couldn't conceptualize a life outside of crime. The beginning. At the age of 15, Raul got involved in cartel activities, serving as one of its young assassins, and people began to call him El Mini 6, a derivative of his father's alias, LM6. Raul did everything in his power to live up to his father's reputation while trying to make a name for himself. The cartel's senior members respected him. Some even began to talk about how influential he would be in the cartel in the years to come. The younger ones admired him and wanted to be like him. Unknowingly, Raul had taken the terrible reality of drug trafficking and chaos and in some way turned it into a glamorous adventure. But here, the roses end. Father's death. In March 2007, Raul's father died in a shootout with armed men. The details of his death remain a mystery today, and as expected, Raul's family refused to cooperate with the police. In the end, no one was accused or arrested in connection with the homicide. The impact of his father's death must have affected young Raul, who was only 15 at the time. But while most people would take their father's death as a warning about the consequences of living a violent life, Raul doubled down on his criminal activities. His violent lifestyle now worked on steroids and became more reckless. Did he feel the need to fill his father's shoes, or try to prove something to someone, himself? Again, we will never know. But what we do know is that his recklessness did not go unnoticed by the authorities, and soon led to their first encounter, the fall of Mini 6. On October 9th, 2007, just a few months after his father's death, Raul was driving through a neighborhood with two friends when the police signaled them to stop. The three friends were in an unregistered armored vehicle, and when the police questioned them, it became evident that the car was stolen. Raul claimed the car was his, but he had no documentation to prove it, so the police had no choice but to detain him. However, he wouldn't stay in prison for long because he was still a minor at that time, or perhaps due to his family connections. Either way, Raul was released and returned to society. Anyone else might have seen it as another opportunity to turn their life around. They probably would have stayed under the radar and taken fewer risks, but not Raul. He was the fish in the water. Violence was his way of life, his oxygen, and for him, there was no other way to live. In 2009, Raul had his second encounter with the police. Raul was participating in a drag race in Las Quintas, the same area where he had been detained 2 years earlier when police officers appeared and ordered the racers to stop. He could have stopped and walked away in peace, but Raul chose his definition of the easy route and started shooting at the police. The police responded with gunfire, and in the end, one officer was injured. Meanwhile, Raul and his accomplices managed to escape. However, they left one of their cars behind, and when state authorities conducted investigations later, they found out that the abandoned vehicle not only belonged to Raul Meza Torres, but that his father was the legendary drug trafficker who had died just 2 years earlier. Additionally, they found various types of ammunition inside the car. Raul had become a wanted man, and his reign of terror had now triggered an active countdown. His final moments. On April 29, 2010, just 5 months after turning 18, Raul had a final confrontation with the Mexican police. Police were patrolling the Las Aguilas neighborhood in the city of Zapopan, Jalisco, when they came across what appeared to be a suspicious vehicle. Inside the vehicle were 18-year-old Raul Meza Torres and his friend Fidel Rojas Felix, 22, who turned out to be a member of the Sinaloa cartel and was also on the Mexican police's wanted list. At that moment, the police did not realize who they were but demanded to search the gentleman's vehicle. So, Raul and Fidel were given two options. They could retreat and allow the police to complete the search, risking the discovery of their identity, or fight and find a way to escape. At this point, you can probably guess which option Raul chose. He was no longer a minor, and if he was arrested, a long prison sentence awaited him. So, both men grabbed their guns and tried to intimidate the police by firing shots into the air, but the undaunted police officer responded by telling them to calm down and surrender. Raul then aimed his gun at the officer and opened fire, killing one officer in the process and injuring a second officer who managed to shoot Raul before being gunned down. When Felix saw that his friend had been shot, he tried to escape on foot, but other nearby police officers pursued and caught him on a nearby roof. The police also found weapons in their car, pistols, and multiple cartridges of ammunition. However, only Felix had the chance to defend himself because Raul died from gunshot wounds. That night he was taken to the hospital, but at 3:40 in the morning the next day, doctors declared him dead. But here's where things start to get strange. Raul's autopsy raised many questions that conflicted with the original police reports at the scene of his death. Because in addition to gunshot wounds, Raul also had multiple head injuries, suggesting that he had been beaten several times with a blunt object, and there was no indication of this in the police report. In court, Felix claimed that the weapons found in the vehicles did not belong to them, and that they were simply carrying them for a high-ranking cartel member known as Colonel Villarreal. Felix also tried to blame everything on Raul, who was now dead and couldn't defend himself. Good move, brother. The police claimed that he had made up the story of being an accomplice and that he had been tortured to confess. The court did not believe this story, and Rojas Felix was sent to jail for killing a police officer and attempting to kill another. To this day, no one knows for sure the true circumstances that led to Raul's death. But does it really matter? Today, Raul is considered an urban legend, and popular songs have been sung in honor of his brief, violent, and ultimately tragic life. But will these songs serve as a warning to other young people to stay away from a life of crime? Or will they serve as inspiration for future tragedies?